Thank you for listening to UK Cinema History. This is a special version of an episode we did on A Man for All Seasons where I wasn't able to participate due to technical difficulties. So you'll be listening to Yassi Sophie and Sila Blue with no Eric Trometer. Enjoy.
Yeah, so Eric has a bit of technical difficulties. I don't know what's happening to him. So I was just saying I was saying I like it when like historical movies are so relevant today, stuff like that. And like from psychological point of view, the characters, from philosophical point of view, everything we can like talk about, not just the movie, but everything surrounding the movie.
So far, I'll be here as long as I don't have customers that want to talk to me. I'll be here.
So, Sila, go ahead. Now that like you're at work, you start. You tell us your first impressions.
Well, I'll probably just name several points instead of because first of all, I would say I'm very impressed with the movie. I think this one is much better than the first one. If we want to draw comparison, the thing I realized by saying that is that I find more to be a very, very different type of expressive individual. He understands language, humor, and the topic very deeply, so he could express himself a lot better than Beckett, I find. But there's a few things that I noticed. First of all, I'm very impressed with Georges Delerue, the composer, because he managed to compose period pieces. I think the music, as far as I could gather, is composed by this guy, but these are mostly, I would say, what's the name of this type of music? Madrigals. Most of them sound like madrigals from that period. And this guy died in 1992, so he's a contemporary. So, Les, can you please close your microphone because we keep getting sounds? Thank you. I find also interesting that the very first words of the film, it's quite quiet. I like from one side the poetic side of it with the opening shots and the topic, the river or the sea, the lake that we see, the showing of these sculptures that I understand as being very humorous, just making fun of everything that's about to happen, which I don't understand because nothing is really funny in the content of the film. I don't find anything funny, even though the king is a little bit. But anyway, and the very first words we hear are when we are introduced to the space where Moore is with his family and friends. And the very first words we hear is coming from a scholar. Every second bastard born is fathered by a priest. Now, there has to be some meaning by Tinnerman or whoever was interested in that to put that as the very first thing that we hear said in the film. I find that extravagant, weird. A slightly jokingly negative point about the film, I think Schofield is an excellent actor, but When it comes to yawning, he has really he doesn't convince me. He yawned twice in the film, and every single time I know he's not yawning. He's just making believe he's yawning. I found that kind of weird because I find him to be a very good actor. Henry says to Moore at some point when he is caught supposedly by surprise in his Chelsea residence, when Moore says, "Well, then why are you asking for my support when I'm so little and so unimportant?" He uses another word. And Henry answers, "But you are honest." And I found that very interesting because in many characters of the film, many persons of the story are looking in some way for the support of Moore, but they're looking always for his support for doing something that they are actually acknowledging. They know they're doing it wrong, at least some of them, and at least to an extent. And I find very interesting how everybody's looking for the support of Moore, and the key there is that he's honest, and that's why they're looking for him. And I was just thinking that these people seem to be also weak, and that's why they seek the support of who they see as an honest and wise person, as if they needed approval to think not alone in the decisions they make. Another very weird situation is when he is Morris on the boat with the boatman, and he throws the silver cup away on the water. Now the boatman says, "What the fuck?" That is very strange. That is not from that time. That expression, "what the fuck," cannot be from that time period. I like it when Margaret says to the king, "Amongst women, I am a scholar." I found that very very interesting. But in general, I would just say I was extremely impressed with the acting of Schofield and with the figure of Moore. The climax, I would say, is, although there's probably a few, but the climax is, I've seen several operas and several situations where you have somebody who's preparing to be decapitated or hanged, and this is I think is the only scene where I see the person who's about to be killed with such an incredible agreement with everything and an inner peace. The way Schofield plays that, he is really pushing me to understand whatever inch I had not been able to understand until now. With that scene before he's decapitated, I am able to be understanding of why a person is so an intense, devout believer, because nothing worries him. He's about to be decapitated, and he forgives the person. Is your job, and the expression on his face is such a powerful conviction of, I am being killed now, but the conviction that I'm going to God, even though it's a ridiculous one, it really impressed me, the way in which he, as a lawyer, as a person, as a father, as a husband, portrays what it means to be a really, really deeply convinced and intelligent person. And I will conclude with saying something he explains to Margaret, which I found very profound, in terms of how to decide when you give in and when you protest, or when you fight, when you don't take what they give you. God made the angels to show him splendor, animals for innocence, plants for their simplicity, but man he made to serve him wittily, in the tangle of his mind. If he suffers us to come to such a case that there is no escaping, then we may stand to our tackle as best we can, and then we can clamor like champions if we have to spittle for it. But it is God's part, not our own, to bring ourselves to such a pass. Our natural business lies in escaping. I understand that as a intellectual and emotional dedication to understand what your wealth is about so that you can defend yourself. Whatever you believe in, you will accept it, but at the same time, you must be able to fight it with proper words, with clear understanding of what you're accepting and why you're accepting it. Thank you.
Uh, Hi, Les. Welcome. Like, what if you want to share? Like, just tell us your general, your first impressions, your general ideas of the movie before, like, we go deep into details.
Well, I actually watched the film about when it came out, I believe. So yeah, I'm not very clear on, in other words, I don't remember the level of detail. I'm here mostly to listen. Um, and one thing I would mention uh, is that back then, people did worry about their immortal souls and everything, and the church had a lot of power. They had all the land. It wasn't until King Henry, Henry either the seventh or the eighth, that the church lands. Well, it was the eighth, Henry the eighth, when the church lands were taken away from them, and so they had money and power back then, and people generally did believe they had to worry about the afterlife, and so and so they didn't feel so bad about how crappy things were back then. This is just kind of the dress rehearsal, and you're gonna end up in Dead Man Disneyland where everything will be fine. So I wouldn't be surprised if Beckett felt that way, um, seeing that in the shadow of his time, and that would also explain where Beckett's power would be because the church was very powerful back then.
Okay, Eric, where are you? You're not back with us yet. Okay, Vern. If I know you, I don't know if you watch it or not, but like, if you want to start, like, share something, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think I might have. I watched some clips last time because I couldn't find a version to watch, and I only know Schofield from. I think he was in the Scarlet Letter or something. He seemed like he plays like the, not the Scarlet Letter, but oh, the one with the witches. What is that called? And he seemed like he's playing a very similar role. Like a highly moral village elder. Except I guess the power is reversed in that film between the two films. But he seems like he's playing a very similar character. But I did not get a chance to watch it, so I'm very curious to hear what you guys are going to say. And I'm shocked that Eric's mic is not working. Like what? I think he left and came back.
Yeah, I think Eric has a problem with upgrade. All right, so I just, like, gonna say, oh yeah, go ahead, Vern. What?
No, no, nope, nope. I've been waiting to upgrade my phone. I was going to do it tonight. Is he? Does he have a Mac, an iPhone, or Android?
Eric is on Android.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
He just texted that he's trying to reinstall the app. So okay, I'll go ahead. I'm gonna say something about Fred Zinnemann first. That w- w- about like his how like he started his career with documentary. And the funny thing about him was that the first thing he done in Hollywood was he was acting. That was an acting role in All Quiet in the Western Front, the original version. And then he made a documentary, and it's supposed to be an educational documentary. So most of his career is kind of influenced by what he learned in documentary, and he also worked with Flaherty. So you see, and he said something very interesting. I put a podcast there in the chat, and he said something really interesting about working in documentaries. He said he learned the rhythm. Just because Sila said something about the score and like how amazing the score of the film is that he kind of like understood the rhythm and the relationship. He said, he explains in that podcast that how he sees everything, every relationship between people, everything that happens in the world, like based on rhythm. He says there is nothing happening in the world if there would be no rhythm. And I really like when he says that, because we can see like how you can create like this pace in this film, uh, with, you know, most of the time these historic periodic historic movies is like goes around the king or the queen. But for this one, he chose the like Thomas More. You know, he created this balance. And then the antagonist of the film is not even Henry VIII, is Cromwell. And the dynamic and the rhythm and all the musicality in the dialogues, I found it really, Sila said he can't see the irony. I think the irony here is like it's kind of like a sense of irony. And you know it's kind of like everyone is singing, everyone is like reciting poetry, but it's everything, the whole situation, the whole like that historic period is so uh it's very interesting, like regarding what was happening in the world. And also, like, I think this kind of like prose and like poetry, and that's kind of singing this bitter part of the history that ended up with beheading six women, is the irony here. Like you said, Sila said, like the beginning of the film, the opening with the gargoyles and stuff. So that gargoyles, I know that from the Notre Dame, like most Gothic architectures, they have this scary appearance to like scare the evil, to be scary, but at the same time they are like static, they can move. So it's just this scary appearance, this just an empty inside. So that is like, I think it's part of the irony of Henry VIII, and so very well depicted on the scene that he comes to visit at Moore's house, and then he gets off the boat and he gets stuck in the mud, and then all the entourage, they got quiet.
That was great.
That wasn't that that's a very good scene. So they all get quiet to expect to like to hear what, like to see what Kings is going to do. They all expect, and then he started laughing. So then everyone started laughing after that. That is like totally a Monty Python scene right there. You see, these are the irony of the time. Like, you are allowed to laugh when the king laughs, you are allowed to eat when he eats. And then when he leaves, when he gets on the boat and he leaves, and then all the entourage, they have to, like, with all those, like, outfits and everything, they have to jump in the water to go, like, to follow the boat. you know these are the and I think that's the fact that the reality, the historic part. I wish Eric was here to, like, help me here with the factual parts, but these are kind of what, uh you know it's these are the factual pictures, images, tableaus of the period of time where the king were allowed himself, had the power, that the whole movie is, we don't see fights, actual fights between them. We don't see wars. We don't see bloodshed until the end, that we see that, like, the beheading, but the execution. But this sense of fear, this sense of threat, this sense of danger, uh, that we constantly fear in the film is very interesting, and it plays to the power play of the whole movie. It's about power play, how everyone is seeking power, how everyone is greedy for power. And then they are so, like, these, the king, that, and also Henry VIII, he was, you know people loved him because, like, imagine how the king before him was, that people loved him, they welcomed him. And then, you know the whole, this is the, like, the show, the theatrical aspect that we see in the movie is kind of feel like a documentary. That's why I said, like, what is interesting about, like, the sense that Fred Zinnemann brought to this film is that with all these colors and music and everything feels like a play, like a stage, like theater. But at the same time, we know that the reality here is, it is kind of like documentary. It is real. So I'm gonna stop here. I don't know if Eric's still back. Eric? No. So okay. Sila, do you want to add anything? Do you want to start by characters? Can you, like, tell us, like, let's go to yeah, let's go to Thomas More himself. What do you think? You said, like, you like Paul Scofield, how he portrays him. Yeah, tell us a bit.
Yes, I'm kind of new to these works for two reasons. One is for me it didn't start until several months ago when I started investigating the work of Ingmar Bergman, and then it just kept escalating. But in my life, I never had too much film. I didn't start watching films really until my 30s, for reasons that I'm not going to go into. But I just find the the person Schofield as an actor and as the more that he's trying to portray. And I don't know anything. I would say I know nothing about the history enough to relativate, to compare, to dry to drive, conclusions, draw conclusions from what is artistic and what is accurate and what is not. But the portrayal of Schofield, the portrayal of Moore through Schofield, and when I read a little bit about Moore, and well, Eric just left. I was just going to spoil his trivia. I have the answer for his trivia question from last week, but I'll save it for later. I'm very, very impressed with the acting, but I'm mostly impressed with the character, as at least the way it is portrayed. And based on the title, apparently this is really the way Moore was. That's why I'm about to answer the question, but I'm going to refrain from answering the question, the trivia question. I just found his person. I, I I came in a couple of days ago and told a friend of mine how impressed I'm with. I was asking him if he saw the film, and I said to him, "I'm amazed to see how well a person could display what it means to believe in God to such a level." And this friend of mine looked at me and he said, "But I thought you don't believe in God." And I said to him, "Well, you got me completely mistaken. I have never said that I don't believe in God. I'm very skeptical about the way we humans believe in God. But I never challenge if there's a God or not. I don't really care if there's a God or not. So I will not argue if there's one or not." But he was very amazed at my statements about more. But the reason I'm saying this is because I really believe that objectively, irrelevant of what I think of Christians, of religions, of God, this more displays a profound connection, inner connection, very educated, very fine, and as I read before, very intellectually agile to be able to support what he believes, and that for me was very impressive.
How about like there are a lot of criticism to this film, to the acting, and to like portrayal of Thomas More specifically. They say like one of the main things that everyone says is that he is like he could be uh for the big, he is for a hero of this movie. He takes no action. All he does from the beginning till the end is he says no, but he takes no action. He stays silent, and that's his take. Like, and he could be more dynamic. He could be, you know, they that's the biggest criticism of the film. They say like the one who like has all the power is the protagonist, is Cromwell. He takes action. And then finally, till the end, the only time that we get to see character of Thomas More shine is the ending, is the trial. So at the trial, he finally says, like, okay, you said all these things. So now it's my turn. So now that I'm like condemned, so now everyone shut up and listen, you know? And so what do you how everyone thinks about that? Do you think that the fact that he chose silence, he practically does nothing, there's no action there, is like, how do you think about that in the character?
I,
Let's
I,
go
I'm
ahead.
I'm I'm going to go jump ahead of anybody, although I've been speaking too much. But I need to add this. First of all, I disagree completely with what you said about this criticism about the film for the following reason. Number one, silence, yes, he occupies that, but silence in a very profound way. And number two, is not the only thing he does. And when he speaks, everybody listens because he knows what he's talking about. And in terms of taking action, we humans are too stupid to recognize the the aggressivity of silence. So, as you just said, Cromwell, you know, with his actionism, yeah, okay. He's spitting a lot. He's jumping around a lot. He's doing a lot of theatricals, but what happens every single time Moore speaks? He doesn't know what to do. He tries to look for another excuse. He is never ahead of Moore. Moore, with his quiet, subtle attitude, is always ahead. Why? Because he understands what he's talking about. He knows the law. Cromwell does not know the law. And he's being sincere. Cromwell is just trying to get power. The only two who are not there for having power is More and the king. The king just wants kids. So for me, it's not really so much about power. He's not really trying to sin. He's even accepting that he has been punished by God because of what he has done, because he has gotten no young boys be born from Catherine. So what he's really asking for is, just give me a break. Let me have sons. And the other ones, Proper, Rich, and Cromwell, and Wolseley not so much, but especially those three, those are the ones who are really, really desperate to have power. Norfolk, the Duke from Norfolk, is also not looking for power. He's just very happy where he is. He's Moore's friend, and he has nothing to defend. I see some details of the film a little bit differently.
Hi, Eric. Eric, you're back? No. Okay, Les, what do you think about Paul Scofield and if you remember like the dialogues and his character in general, do you think like uh uh does it like he keeps saying no? Is he passive? You found the character passive or for a protagonist, or how do you see him?
Well, yeah, I better sit this one out because I was confusing Thomas A. Becket with Thomas More and the two Henrys. I thought with my earlier comments, and that's why I was.
No, no, it's
Uh,
totally fine because
I
we
just
kind of
want.
like compare these two. If you have anything to say about Beckett, that would be okay too.
Well, I mean, I know a little bit of English history, not a lot, uh, but I don't remember the movie that well. I remember thinking it was a very serious movie. I was very young at the time, um, and but I just don't remember that much. I'm so sorry. It's almost 60 years ago for me, for everybody, I guess, that saw it at the time. But I'm here mostly to listen, and it's a shame Eric can't get on because it sounds like he knows a lot about the film.
Yeah, I don't know where, but Eric. Okay, so I'm gonna say something about this. Like they said, when your character, to Sila, to the point that why, like they say, basically he just said no. The criticism, which I totally agree with you, that's not what he does. They said that when your protagonist keeps saying no and takes no action, it's so passive, it makes the character so flat. And and then it's like open to be parodied, the character. So but you know and you know that instead of Paul Scofield, they wanted to cast Richard Burton, since we watched Richard Burton in Beckett last week. So they said like he could perhaps with he could bring more to this character. But I think, in my opinion, this kind of like, as you said, sometimes taking silence, like choosing silence, is action. You know, you what do when you're the smartest person in the room, he's like, to me, I found what was so interesting to me was that when the movie begins, you immediately, like, if you don't know anything about history, if you don't know anything about the play, like, you go in totally blind, you see, you get like, you immediately, by the symbolism, by the atmosphere, by the world build, and then that the letter that it's like going to hand, you know, you can immediately find yourself in the history. You know immediately where you are and who you're dealing with. The people who, as you said, like the way that all these, like in that very religious environment, that everything we see all the like Catholic icons and symbols and imagery. We see like the joke that they make about like the priests and the bastard kids, you know. We immediately see that we're going to have a Bible story, a historic story, but a monarchy, politics, religion, but none of them, like when we get to know um Thomas More, none of them matters. That character, that presence, how Paul Scofield portrays him, we, I think to me, at the moment that he starts speaking, religion didn't matter, politics didn't matter. What intrigued me was I wanted to know the character. I wanted to know him. I wanted to know what he stand for. The you see in right at the beginning what he stood for, the ideology, his presence. And I think that, uh, of course, Paul Scofield played that character for a long time on stage, theater, and so he brought that here too. But uh, do you think that, based on Beckett that we watched, do you think Richard Burton could have done a better job?
If I read that correctly, the production company, I can't remember the names of them, they wanted um, Richard Burton and another person. They wanted to have some big stars because at least back then in film, more, I'm sorry, Schofield didn't have a name. He was famous as a theater person, but he was not famous in cinema. And I believe Cinnamon himself, somebody told him about this Schofield, and then he talks about how impressed, how moved they were just listening to him doing his parts, and they were just really, really impressed with the way he took it. So, according to Cinnamon, Richard Burton did not give what he wanted to have for that film.
Agreed. So let's move on to another character, and let's move on to the ladies of the movie. Let's see. So we have Alice, and we have the beautiful daughter,
Margaret.
Margot. Margaret. So what do you think? Like, comparing to Beckett and this one here. So how did you find the ladies in the movie?
I'm going to refrain because I'm talking too much.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So it's gonna be me again. So, oh, okay, Les, if you, anytime that you wanted to jump in, just jump in, okay, please, because I don't know when you want to share something. So I just want to say something else. The other thing that I wish Warren was here, he could have helped me with this one, was that the character that we see first is Orson Welles as Wolsey, and Orson Welles, I mean, he's huge. He's big. And his makeup, he did his own makeup. He normally does his own makeup. And Les, if you want to help me here with the like Orson Welles at that time, how he looked, how he liked to play in these type of uh, uh, historic, Shakespearean or theatrical characters. Help me, please. And anything from any of his movies, like Chimes of Midnight, if you remember, or anything about Wells. So what I found about Wells was that I saw him And I immediately thought of Steve Bannon. And I thought to myself that, oh my, Orson Welles at like as a big tomato with that makeup, he looks like Steve Bannon. And then from that point, the only thing I did from till the end of the movie was that I tried to find like parallel character to today politics in the movie. And sadly enough, you can find the exact same examples in today politics, contemporary, and yeah, there are many analogies we can make to the characters. Uh, like you have something like the I thought yeah, Steve Bannon was my first, and yeah, so anything about the character of Wolsey and portrayal of Orson Welles, if anyone wants to participate.
If nobody says anything, that I would take it back to the other one, to the women. Vanessa Redgrave, of course, appears. That must be one of her first films, and she's really, really insignificant. Especially if I kept thinking about the opera Anna Boleyn or Anna Bolena, which refers to the end of Anna, not to the beginning of Anna, and she's really she turns out to be useless. But there are many situations that are interesting. Obviously, as everybody knows, the woman in those days, a little bit more than today, it's really has its space, its place, and it should not override that. The woman should stay in her boundaries. As Moore says, woman, tend to your house. And at the same time, it was very clear. Well, many things were clear. One, for example, that Alice does not want to learn how to read. He says, when he retires, he says, how about I teach you to read? And she said, my God, no. So it's difficult for me to relate to the mentality of those days. And at the same time, when they say goodbye in the dungeon, in his cell, and the way she reacts at the end when she's pushed so hard that she said, "Okay, I cannot refuse. I have to show my emotions." And then he says, "That's the lion I married. That's the lion I love." So she was a lion. That's why he was with her, even though she was in her place in many ways. And of course, Margaret was a very, very unique intellect in those days for being a woman, and just in general, I think today she would still be an interesting intellect. The way she was able to hold a conversation in Latin with the king, and I really like this duality of the character and the importance of women as they showed it in these two ladies. For me, it was just an interesting combination of they are less than us, but they could still be special and they could still develop something particular about the uniqueness of that individual that happens to be a woman.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Eric, are you back with us? You're trying. All right. So yeah, exactly. Like Wendy Hiller, so she is kind of she knows she's the she's she's very well in these periodic movies. She was in a Separate Home, she was in Pygmalion, and she is kind of presents this woman of the era. That's what I can say about her. And she the way I love like how as you said, the their relationship is very interesting. She's actually, it's not mentioned in the movie, but historically she is uh Thomas More's second wife. She is not mother to Margaret. She's her stepmom. But
Oh, I didn't know
yeah.
that.
Oh, you didn't know. So yeah. So the both her husband died, and Thomas More's wife died. So they kind of like, she presents to me. Actually, she has an arc from the like writing point of view, which is really great, because when you see like Cromwell has an arc, Thomas More has an arc, Richie Rich has an arc, and the other one, they gave an arc to Alice. She starts to, she has this uh we see her at the beginning, and we see the relationship, the dynamic in the house, how she kind of like, you feel like this is a patriarch kind of house, as you said, like they send women in the kitchen. But the way that that like more private conversations between Thomas More and Alice, and Thomas More and Margaret. We see a kind of like point there. Uh, she has ideas. She stands in front of the king. She says, like, King, I know you're asking me a question, but I don't see myself as a person to answer you. She keeps quiet. But when it gets to her husband, she participates. She wants to help. She wants to, like, the point, her first plot point is like when uh Thomas More tells her that, do you, if you want to know, and then are you ready to face the consequences that comes with knowledge? So we see
Correct. That was very good.
that. Yes, did you feel that too? So she says, we see her. It's kind of like the way that she stands in front of the king. It's kind of like foreshadowing what comes next. So she is not ready to stand in the court and answers, but she's ready to give it all to the family, as you said, like the devotion to the husband. Maybe she doesn't understand her husband's devotion to his principles, but she understands her devotions to her principles and to her family, and she wants to hold this house together. She wants to solve the problem, and then she has a climactic point, like in the arc. So that's the beginning, and then we had that climactic moment with, like, when she resolves, the kicking at the stairs, and with the husband, that emotional scene, you know and that's a very well done, rounded character, I can say. And I wish, like, Eric was here, he could help me, or anyone if has seen the movie. How Green Was My Valley, Beth Morgan. It kind of reminded me of that, because it is a patriarch family, but Alice looks like a person who wears pants in that house. You see that. And I like that. I like how they build it up, and how Thomas More, it's not just his devotion to the king. He doesn't want, he explains to his wife that, I don't want your, I want your soul to be blemish free of sort. That's what I can say. So I like that. I like that he cares to the character. Like, that's how he shows affection, you know he that's who he is, and we see it. That's his ultimate love. you know Maybe I would like to see more of them, but yeah, that's how women characters in these type of movies. They're like, so, like, underrated, and that's it. We saw it, but comparing to Beckett, I have to say they were amazing here, how they like were
Yeah, yeah.
depicted.
In Beckett, they showed no real core. They were just decoration pieces. But yeah, that's very different here.
Yeah, and very like snaky in Beckett. There were like, there were nothing to those. And then as Vern said last week, they downplayed the women there to gave Beckett and Henry II more power, to give them power. But here we see very honest and frank moments between Thomas and Alice, when like they sit together and they talk. And then when she, that chain, when he has to like, Thomas has to give up the chain, the his power, and he says, help me here. He looks at his wife and says, help me, like gave this chain up. And she says no. She says, what is this? What are you doing? the your actions have broad consequences, and it's gonna affect us. Why don't you think about us? And that's what I really liked about her. She was she I can't say the sound of reason, because she didn't want to be the sound of reason, but she tried to ground him, to remind him that what what you are doing, what you're standing for, I know it's the greater good, but maybe sometimes the greater good is not for the good of your family. How about your family? That I really like that like honest. She was so honest in the and I don't think in that point she was downplayed here. I think that I said it before, like she has an arc, and that's very good and well depicted in the film. So, yep. Anything? If anyone wants to add, nothing. Eric,
She doesn't.
Sila, please go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to add that she. I would say, just to give it a name, it's her soul, or her animalistic instinct and emotions that are telling her you cannot, your family is losing through this. She doesn't have the intellectual fortress. She doesn't have the reasoning. The daughter, I don't know if the daughter wanted to become a lawyer or would have liked to become a lawyer, but for some reason she has that mind, that intellectual mind, and is able to reason and argue and look for debates in those couple of dialogues. That's actually in prison. That's actually a debate going on where she says, well, for this and this and this reason, you cannot do this. And she says, yeah, but consider this. And then she comes back and then she loses, of course. But she has the intellectual capacity, which Alice doesn't have for whichever reason. But I like both show their power in their own ways. And he loves them for both. For both.
Yeah, exactly. I totally understand. Like, and so we that gets us to Margaret. You said that she, like Alice, she doesn't have the education or the that
Correct.
level of, yeah,
Correct.
intellectuality to involve in those arguments, and she doesn't allow herself. We see the different generations of how, and what I really really liked that was so well depicted was how important the role of education is. And from the historic point of view, we could see like all the ages and times that women, and in a very short period of time, like short dialogues with women and presence of women in the film, we could see how like all the you know the marginal like how women has been marginalized since the dawn of time. you know and Margaret, kind of like the first educated woman of 16th century here, standing in front of the king is there to uh kind of you know for his he wants to get divorced and get remarried, all that, and still sees that well educated lady, and he starts flirting with her. You see, like, man, what are you doing? Is that all you can do when you see, so it doesn't matter if, even like, if you can speak fluent Latin, still to the eye of the king, you are, you know, you kind of like insignificant. And he asks you if you can dance. Or, that was, I said to myself, and then,
Yes, 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 but Yasi, I'm sorry to interrupt, but maybe you should consider the other angle. Maybe you should consider that when Henry VIII sees this woman who's intellectually able, then it's not so much that he reduces her, nevertheless, but that makes her a lot more powerful and desirable in his eyes. Because it would be the same for me. If I see an intelligent woman, I'm happy.
of course, but will you ask that intelligent woman, do you dance? Or like you connect?
Maybe.
I think he, okay, I gotcha that. Or maybe he's intimidated. I thought because she was fluent and he wasn't. So he goes, yeah, he immediately finds something that he knows that he's better at. Because maybe.
Look at these dancers' legs.
Yeah, see? So he still wants to be, again, you see, power play. We even like at that moment of we have like we're so concerned about the family and how they're going to react, and the way that Thomas More, like when King Henry VIII like turns his back and Margaret stands up and
Yes,
he puts
yes.
his head under, yeah. So what do you think
Not
about
yet, not yet. Go
their
back down.
so beautiful. Their chemistry, the father daughter chemistry, so well. I really like that about them. And then, yeah, so, that subplot. So, this is, I think that's where I found like the writing well, again, the writing very rich and very well was the principles of Thomas More in the family, and how he still like tried to be this father figure, and that subplot presented there also visually, like we see there just like by a simple hand gesture, and like trying to like bring her daughter down to the like kneeling position. That tells a lot, again, tells to like, I say it again, like I kind of repeat myself, speaks to that ages of like marginalizing women. And but with when you present it like that, with a sense of humor, it sits with the audience, it's not forced there, it's very well depicted, and also shows the reality, the truth to Thomas More's character. And you can see like Margaret, that's how she behaves in the home, so that she doesn't know that she has to stay like kneel in front of the king. And I found that really powerful between like this father daughter relationship. That was so good. So if you don't want to add anything else to Margaret for now, we I want to like talk about his fiance, because Colin Redgrave, uh, the William Roper uh, actor, he, now that we are in the middle of this war, he like he was an activist. Yeah, like he became an activist, and he was like years ago, he stood like for in siege of Gaza Strip. He was an activist there, and he was like defending the Romanian people, and he was so like humanitarian and philanthropist after like he puts his acting career aside. So I thought that it's worth mentioning here. So, and we let's talk about his character, William Roper. So, Sila, how did you find Roper?
I I was not too impressed. I had no problems with. I think there's one problem that I have, and I think many of us might have it, especially those who are younger than me, because when I see Vanessa Redgrave, I know Vanessa Redgrave as an icon, as a famous, important, whatever you want to, adjectives you want to give her. But in this film, she's small. She's not, she's a Redgrave, but she's nevertheless at the beginning. Same thing with her brother. Her brother, if I go into what he has done in the last, before he died, in the last 50, 60 years, we're talking about 60 years ago that he did that film. So I have to separate John Hurt in that film from the John Hurt, from the iconic John Hurt that I have in my system. And he doesn't come anywhere close. And that's the point I'm trying to make. If I want to contemplate the importance of Colin Redgrave, I cannot do it by looking at this film, because in this film he is not a mature actor. And and not only that, but I have a mature, iconic person in my head and in my system, and then I see John Hurt playing that little, his perseverance, and but John Hurt became so much more than that. So I just find it very difficult to speak of Roper, because that role for me was not insignificant, but a very small, detailed aspect of what's supposed to happen. But it doesn't compare to what I know as a person living in the 21st century.
Oh, okay, we get to John Hurt, but for now, so let me help you here by saying, like, that the biography of Thomas More that we have today is written by William Roper. He wrote the biography. So maybe, like in my idea, maybe he wasn't that perfect as he like his son-in-law tried to portray him and write him. But yeah, so because we see in the movie like how he changed from like at the beginning he seems a little bit slick, and then especially like when it gets again to this that scene of taking out off the chain of the office, so no one's helping, but then he jumps in. He said, okay, I can help. So I was like asking myself, like, dude, what are you doing here? So are you another Rich? Are you like just
Correct, correct.
right? So like, but then as like the movie goes on, especially like when they try to convince Thomas More to that you have to get rid of Rich, which is a very beautiful scene. Like his monologue is amazing there. The way, yeah, like what he says about the devil. He says if the devil himself walks in, I won't condemn him unless I
Yes,
see him
yes.
commit a crime.
I mean, I just love these arguments that Moore kept bringing up. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so about the arguments, now that you brought up later, I wanted to talk about like the Socratic part aspect of the movie, and how like so later we get to the that like the monologues and the dialogues and the debates. But to that, like we see at that point that Richard, that William, that Roper, he's just genuine. He tries to blend in with the principles, but you know, Thomas More bar is pretty high, so he's trying. He's just trying, and yeah, but just as the reality of history, we know that he's the biographer. Uh, we can like let it slip his idiocy and some of the things. Yeah, okay, I understand. So I wish like Eric was here so he could help me with the historic aspect. I don't know what he's still trying. So okay, so okay, now that you said about the John Hurt, so we get to John Hurt. We love John Hurt. Uh, John Hurt was amazing. He's just a baby here. He's not the Elephant Man John Hurt. He's not the V for Vendetta villain. He is kind of, we can say he is a villain here. He is an antagonist of sort. He, he's an opportunist. But why do you, Sila? Why do you say that? You didn't like his acting. I kind of love how like he is this, you know this he literally sold his soul to the devil, and he doesn't care. He is the guy. What I can say is that he becomes puppet to Cromwell. And at the beginning, like when like before that scene that we just talked about, the devil scene, he walks in and he just like he slipped in the mud, and he just comes in like a baby, like a whiny little baby. And he says like, oh, look what I've done to my shirt, and I need to wash my shirt. And he's so slimy, and that like he slips through everyone's hand. No one could do him any harm. And historically, we know that everyone dies, gets executed and beheaded in this film. Everyone but Richie Rich. He's the one who gets.
And Norfolk. Norfolk
And Norfolk,
was
of course.
supposed to be, but the king died of syphilis, so he overlives that one.
Yes, the irony. No one but him. Like the only. Oh my, you're right. See, that's the. But yeah, but the way that John Hurt, he plays this character, he's like, uh how can I say, like he doesn't care. Like he comes to that court, he stood there, he looks Cromwell in the eye, and he lies. That
Okay,
is so. And we see, but about his acting, we know that he's lying, you know and we see the like what I really liked was that he you know he's not intelligent, we know, because he wants to be part of the he's ambitious for a political position. But Thomas More is so wise and like knowledgeable, and he reads him well, and he's aware of the danger of putting snakes like him into powerful positions. This is yeah, what do you think about it?
well, two things I would say about Richard Rich. One is that he is simply a a very immature soul who doesn't want to be a teacher because he will not be known if he's a teacher. So that's his inspiration. He wants to be a superstar, just like many people who go to America is what's that called? American Idol, and they want to become superstars. They don't want to be musicians. They want to become superstars, and that's the same thing he wants. So that's the first principle in his being. The other one, which is more to his credit, is every human being has a certain amount of years to build or to make their beginnings somewhat sound. That could be through the grandmother to their parents, through a book. I don't know. But this guy, he is not really that bad at the beginning, as he becomes at the end when he really lies through his teeth. At the beginning, in more than one occasion, he shows clearly that he's not yet, he hasn't bathed yet with that dirty water, and he's saying, well, to a friendship, of course not. So he, at the beginning, he's showing clearly he wants to be faithful, and he even says that to Moore before he walks out. I'll be faithful, and then he learns little by little that by being faithful, he will not go anywhere. And I think that's the training that many humans get. They're born in a society where they see if you are nasty, you'll get somewhere, and others are more adept to being good because they see examples clearly that if I'm good, if I stick to my principles, I will succeed to the level I want to succeed to. I might not be famous, but I will be pure in my heart. And he is spoiled throughout the film, little by little, when he comes to a point that he says, okay, I'll just go all the way. But he shows in at least two instances at the beginning and towards the middle that he wants to be, he doesn't want to lie, he doesn't want to bullshit. But he comes to the point where he says, okay, I'll do it.
To me, I found him as like the Yoda, you know, Yoda, Judas, Judas to Jesus, because Thomas More is kind of like a very Jesus character, and he even like gets, you know, like he's martyr, like he gets martyr at the end. So he is,
He's better than Jesus, and I'll
yeah,
explain later why. I'll
practically.
explain. No, I'll explain later why. He's better than
Okay,
Jesus.
sure, sure. And he is like our Yoda, he's Jodas to our Jesus. And I kind of, I was thinking all the way, like, what if, he asks for this position, he asks more, but more keeps saying no to him because he is aware of the danger of his character. I said it before, but
Yeah,
what if he
yeah.
would say yes? What if he would say yes? What if he was given this?
Yes.
Do you think
I'm glad you
that
asked.
he was still ambitious, like he wanted more, or
I'm
like
glad you're
he?
asking that question because I believe that's just my own calculation, my own redeemable aspect of being. If, and that's the other side of what I was just saying a couple of minutes ago, because, and he says it also when Moore is walking away, he says to him, I would prefer that you say yes to me than Cromwell. He knows that that Moore is the right teacher for him. He wants to be supported by Moore because he knows he's genuine. So to your question, if he would have been, if Moore would have said yes, he probably would have been a much better man because he becomes that example that if I am true to myself, I'm going to be helped by people who think like me and not perverts like Cromwell.
Oh, that's like so good that you said that, because now I'm thinking, now that you said like Thomas More is better than Jesus because he's more humane. He also slips. He also makes mistake. He also like doesn't see things that he has the way that they are. You know, if as you said, if he would say yes to this guy, the character would have developed totally different. he would have instead of creating this snake, this monster that like sets him to get hammered by him, he could have an ally to that.
Yes, yes.
And the arc would have been totally different. Very interesting. Because now he's just, he's like the Tim Roth character in The Cook the Thief. and yeah, about him, how many examples do you want me to like give you? I can give you the example of the one that we have, that like he goes to Mexico and then blames his kid for them. And we have plenty. Like Richie Rich, we have many of them right now in Congress. Everyone you can pick, and there he is. So anyway, about his costumes. So something about his costume is so fascinating, is that so he becomes, by the end, when he comes to the trial, he is the what is it called, like the
Chancellor
forehead
of
of the,
Wales.
yeah. So like no, not the chancellor. He's, what is his position? He is the yeah. So he gets this position, uh and he walks in with this robe with the dragon on it, which is like, okay, the symbol is, it is the same dragon on the Wales flag, obviously. But something that I saw also there was that, you know, I could like see the dragon as also the reptile, the snake, kind of. I related to that. Like, see what you did. You you kind of uh, allow a snake grows in your house, harboring a snake in your sleeve, and that was so bitter, and I found it so scary to see, what like when you, as you just said, only if you weren't distracted by all this dirty political games surrounding you, maybe instead of this red dragon snake in the Garden of Eden, you could have had an ally. That was like insult to the injury. Like seeing that guy. Oh no, and because we see his downfall slowly, like his arc, I found it so beautiful, well, very well written, you know comparing to our main antagonist, which is none other than Thomas Cromwell. So what I found very interesting with Thomas Cromwell is that our antagonist and our protagonist both share the same name, Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell. So it's like they're both,
And Thomas Becket.
and Thomas Becket. There you go. Three Thomas. It's like they're like two sides of one coin. And the symbolism there, so well written, so beautiful. And how they're like totally two opposites. Like Thomas Cromwell is exactly what Thomas More could have been if he fell to the dark side, to the Sith. If our Jedi would turn Sith, was Thomas Cromwell. And how he becomes puppet. Okay, he's puppet to Henry VIII, and he gets himself a toy, another puppet, which is Richie Rich. And that, like, he does all the dirty work to Henry VIII. And man, he's nasty. He's the one that, when he, at the end, I have to confess, I was like, okay, you deserve that. You did not deserve that head on your neck, man. You are the nasty one. You're the dirty one. So what do you think about Cromwell? From I have to say, like, Leo McKern, the actor. So we see him in Lady Hawk, we see him in Blue Lagoon, we see him a lot everywhere. So tell me, what do you think about the character, or and how he is portrayed?
Um, I, I, I think he is just like Rump, Rumper and just like Rich. He's just one of those pawns that happens to be there and happens to gain power because he happens to be in the right place and because he happens to be weak enough to take that power. So for me, even though he does a lot of spitting and for those of you who don't know it, I happen to read that he, in a very young, as a very young man, he was playing some sports. I can't remember what it was that he was playing, where he lost an eye. So in towards the end of the film, you see one of his eyes moving around the other one. Is because he's always had a glass eye from very early on. But to me, he's just playing his part of a person who takes, an opportunist. To me, there is no bone. There's no meat on that bone. He's just another jerk. I don't see too much on him. I wanted to say something else, but I forgot. No, I really don't see too much importance to his role. He is also the first one who dies, who is decapitated, I think, just 5 years after Moore. So he was the first one to be gotten rid of by treason for treason, just 5 years after Moore. He was very filthy. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. You spoke about education, and I have noticed that in many films. I saw the series Outlander. I like that very much, how they focus on education, not just education, but on being educated. But the other side of the coin is that in this film, you clearly see the opposite of that. You clearly see that Rich keeps going up the ladder without education, just because he's willing to lick the right corner. You see that Cromwell goes up even though he has no education and no experience. And actually Beckett, if we go back to Beckett, is the same thing. He keeps going up because of privileges, because Henry loves him, but he has no education. He's educated, as I said a week ago. He is educated enough to do what he needs to do, but he doesn't have the education to be a bishop or any of the things he got. The same thing with Cromwell. The way I understood it, he just moved up the ladder because he was in the right place, but he had no credentials to be able to do what he did.
That's so true. So that you see that exactly. But we know that like historically he knows Thomas More from like, because they were both lawyers from the law school. So he has that education. But to me, what I saw is like he is the personification of devil's advocate. He is the guy who gives like the lawyers the bad name. He is the character that perverts the legal system. So, like, from the writing point of view, why he is interesting is that, let's go back to the beginning of our conversation, like when I said there are criticism to how Thomas More is portrayed and how he is passive. So Cromwell is the character to, like, I can use against those negative criticism. because he is the anti-mentor. He is the anti-mentor to Richard. He is sneaky. He is the mentor of dishonesty. The total opposite, the like just opposing, like the other side of the coin to Thomas More. So if we have a protagonist, if we have a hero, we need a protagonist, an antagonist. We need a strong villain for that hero to shine. So what do we have here? We have Thomas More, historically almost accurate, presented here, and he is like hand of the king. Represents the king of the era, and he does his dirty work. And what a good villain does is that he keeps the stakes high. He raised the stake constantly. And that's exactly what Cromwell character does here. And it's so very well written. Like to the point that like he made me sick. I said, like, where is my sick bag? I'm about to vomit. Because this guy, he says, okay, let's bring that, like the symbolism. Let's bring that chalice in. That didn't work. Let's bring another one in. He's like, let's bring the family in. He keeps push Thomas More to act. They say, okay, he's passive. He keeps saying no. What our villain does, which is the very well written, is a villain that keeps like like turns it up, turns the stake up, turns the danger up, keep creating this sense, like he's keep intriguing our hero, our protagonist to act. And that's
So, so,
exactly what happens.
so I have a question. Do you? This is a general question. I've never thought of this before, but because of what you're getting at, I would ask the question: a an antagonist, or is he to is is he to have a backbone? Is he to have a concept? Is he to have a purpose that really has legs and hands? Is he to be a reasonably motivated person because he has a real goal? Or is an antagonist like Cromwell just a jerk being an opportunist who just wants to get ahead of the game, just wants to be against everything, just wants to mess everything up? Because in this case, I would then accept it. But I, with my little mind, I expect that in the same way that Moore is filled with conviction and studying, and by the way, Cromwell might have had an education, but he was not educated. He was just a jerk with an education. He was just a jerk with a diploma. So, in the same way that Moore has in his soul, in his mind, in his intellect, has trained himself, has developed concepts as to why he thinks and believes the way he does, I would expect the opposite figure to do the same, just in the different direction. But for me, Cromwell is just he just wants to provoke. He just wants to do what the king says. I just want to do. We have to reduce the difficulties for the king. So he has no concept. Reducing the difficulties for the king is not a concept. It's just licking where the king tells you to lick.
What you said about like education is different from like the knowledge and what you stand for. Totally agree with you. You couldn't have said it better. Like that doesn't say anything. Like you can have like not in like any education, like Alice that we just spoke about, and she can have more character than Cromwell, exactly. And yeah, so but he's a shady alliance. He's a shady alliance that stands at the wrong side of the history. But I think we need him. From the not maybe not in history. No, we don't need him, and we don't need him anymore. But sadly, we're keep getting
in the
people
arts.
like him. Yeah,
Yeah.
but from the like in the movie, from the cinematic point of view, from the
Yes.
script writing point of view, he is like he is the driven point. He's what we need. He is the he is the hand to the Henry the 45th, as you said it
Yes,
like
and
that.
and, and, and and in that matter, we can compare it again to Beckett. In Beckett, we don't need, if I remember correctly, maybe I'm wrong, but if I think of Beckett, we don't need a Cromwell, because in Beckett, the king is that figure, because he's giving a reason. He's the one acting. He's the one trying to manipulate things. He's the one. He doesn't cause his death directly, but in a way he does. But he is the source, and in this case, the king is actually. I mean, the king is, at least in the display of this film, he is not stupid. I think I saw a couple of situations where you could tell the Henry VIII was not a stupid person, at least not in this display in the film. But he was a very, very childish. He just enjoyed that he had big toys to play with, and he used them. But he was not. He was looking to explain the concept. He kept saying to Moore, "Look, I have no children." He almost cried, saying, "I have no children. I need that you do this for me because I'm lost. I have nothing." But Cromwell has no concept. He has zero concept. He's just doing what the king told him to do, and he likes power, and he knows that if he licks the king in the right place, he's going to get something back. So, and that's, yeah. Anyway.
Oh, actually, you're very right about when we compare it to Beckett. Why don't we have? That's very interesting conversation, because why don't we need uh uh a villain in like Cromwell in that movie to raise the stakes? So what's happening here? Because I think, in my opinion, in Beckett, we don't have a protagonist like Thomas More. And like you know n- what I how I see uh Cromwell right now, like what comes to my mind is, like, remember the beginning of Dark Knight? He is like when Joker, like Joker and all his goonies, like when Joker tells his goonies to kill each other, and he just sits back and like like how he's passionate about lying, how he's passionate like to be on the dark side, how that is what. And we don't have that in Beckett. In Beckett, the challenge and the what makes those characters complex is about their relationship. The relationship between Beckett and the king. But
Correct.
here,
Correct.
and there is there is some morality to Beckett's character. We don't have that here. We have the dark side and the light, as like very simple, if you want to look at it so simple like that. Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened. So yeah, so what we get is a character, like someone like Cromwell, to like but yeah, I said like to like make, the moment that uh we see Thomas More uh stands in that court and looks these like, he Crumble to me, he doesn't have like any qualms. He is the liar, he is the cheater. Like, you're right. Maybe the question is, why don't we see the king in that position as we see Beckett? So, because as you just mentioned, the problem here, the like that at that point of history, what we have is a king desperate to have sons, desperately looking for heir, because he even though people liked him, that's very like fascinating from like historic point of view. He is so desperate to have sons, to like have his name like continue in history. And what happens at the end is like, they say like karma is a bitch. It is, because he lost all his sons, and the one who continues his name in a very beautiful way, like glorious, is Queen Elizabeth, from like his first wife, the one that he's like desperately trying to get rid of here. I said like, yeah, that is the moment that we see the silver lining in history. How, like, you see, that is the only thing that gave me hope, is that you want to like reform with the dirty, like, king with full of lust. He's like trying to stand up to God and to Pope and to church just to get laid. you know it- and in the name of God. And what you to have like sons, what you get at the end is people who used to like you, people who loved you when you like in your coronation, and then they become the mob power against you. Then they don't want you no more. That is like the only thing. And I think uh, what Cromwell brings to not even um, Thomas More character, but also speaks to the king. I said it. He's the representation of the system, of the corruption of the system, of how you see the downfall and what happens, as you said, when you like allow, like, how someone like Thomas More stops people like Richard or Cromwell get in the system, and he has the wisdom to see it, like to prevent the disaster to happen, the catastrophe to happen. And in contrast, like, we have the system that allows these, like, as you said, like this suckers, like, uh, yes mans, who would become puppets to the power, and like come and crumble, like destroy the system to the ground. And what will happen when you side with the king, and when you side to the is that you're gonna, like, how long like when you choose your alliance from the shady side, and every time when you try to like fish from the, like, desperate characters like Richard, what happens is, like, they become your downfall. They become, like, they eat you also. Like, why do you think that the king, who uses you to do his dirty work, what makes you think that he's going to side with you later? He is a psychopath. You don't ally yourself with psychopaths, you know? when you're greedy, when you just want more and more and more, what happens is that, just like Joker Goonies, they're gonna eat you. One day is your turn. It is like maybe so cliche and like so preachy, like, but that's it. And I think that is the only silver lining to this whole to this story, because for real, he is the only one that I was so happy to hear that he gets executed. No one, like, not Anne Boleyn. I know where she comes from. Like, those are sad characters. Those are tragedies of history. But Cromwell, he chose to be on psychopath side. He chose to, like, side with murderers and villains. For what? That, like, he that's so, and that will bring us to kind of like conclusion, I think, to the story. And I want to, like, ask a few questions, like anyone. First of all, I want to compare this to something that is so related to today's history, and is the life of Emile Zola and his famous J'accuse article about the trial of Dreyfus. I don't know if anyone knows anything about that. Les, if you have watched Life of Emile Zola, if you remember that movie, if anyone wants to, like, participate.
I've studied the history, but I didn't watch the movie.
So please tell us.
Okay, so actually, the funny thing is that Dreyfus was basically a jerk that didn't have very many friends, but he was he was imprisoned and struck down his rank. I A lot of that was anti-Semitism, and I don't remember if there was also. So this was in the time the German Prussia had just overrun France in the 1870s war, the Franco-Prussian War, and I'm assuming they needed scapegoats, and so you need to have some group that is pretty powerless, and Jews kind of meet that description. So they tried to pin their failures on somebody else. Don't blame you. Don't blame me. Blame that guy behind the tree. And uh, and then Zola was the guy that exposed it. Again, personality-wise, I understand Dreyfus was, had a terrible personality, but he wasn't guilty, and he was just a scapegoat for this whole thing.
True. So let me, yeah, so maybe character wise, but there is something really interesting if we, like, want to compare the political situation that's happening right now, um with the political situation in England in 16th century, and with, like, what was going on in France in 19th century. And was that what I see, and is so, like, these trials, to put innocent people on trial, and to, like, mostly judge people for their beliefs and for their religious belief. And that, like, for us, standing right now, like, in United States, when, like, the state and religion are separated, the state and church are separated, and maybe we, like, forget what we have right now, the, like, how precious this is, this, like, mm, you know to mm, because when we see like how we lost people like Thomas More throughout history, or what happens in Dreyfus trial, is that they put, technically he's been charged because he was Jewish. And and it's still so relevant today, because not only like because of his religion in both movies and in history, also when truth is under attack. And I think that is so interesting to see when the system is corrupt, when you mix two things that are not related, when you try to like mm, kind of justify your corruption in the political system in the name of religion, what happens, which is also so prevalent today, is first the danger of the mob, and the second is like you put truth and everything that like the politicians or like people in charge should stand for at risk and at danger, and corrupt them. Like, if anyone wants to participate, if anyone, if it's not too preachy, if I'm not reaching, if you have anything, you know, if you see the similarity or it's just me.
Go ahead, Les.
Oh, I was gonna say, you'll see people making claims because they reinforce what they want to believe, um, without any proof, and people are allowed to say very outrageous things, um, without providing a reliable source for it. Things that are very libelous and can cause, basically race riots. When I say race riots, I mean ethnic riots, and that could be over any kind of thing like religion or ethnic group. And so I think I think social media, this platform in particular, as well. You see this all the time, and the only thing you can do is set up some rules that, big claims need big evidence, and the problem is that, this is called Brandolini's law. That, it's 10 times harder to, um, disprove bullshit than it is, uh, to present it. And I think it's going to get worse with AI because you can mass produce, sock puppets to do this kind of bullshit thing. And the only thing I think we could do is set up guide, some rules in rooms, uh, that if someone makes a claim, just send them down, to the audience until they produce, evidence that they can represent, not just hand you a 2 hour, um, YouTube video that no one can see, but actually put something in text from a reliable source and then read out what part, makes would be convincing. Um, and the other problem you have is if you repeat a lie long enough, uh, you should try to use the same words of the lie, and then people will just eventually just assume there must be some truth to it. Or if there's a little kernel of truth, that the whole thing must, you have to disprove the whole thing. No, you just have to prove that it really is like an edge case or something like that to make it not worth worrying about. Thank you.
Thank you. Sila, do you have anything?
Well, there's a, like I said earlier, I'm in the last half a year, I've been watching some certain films or series dealing with how humans have done things 200 or 800 years ago. And the one thing that comes to mind quite clearly is, which I like more in older periods, 1700s, 1500s, that we did everything more directly. I guess part of the advantage that I see is that most places had more purity in terms of the Scottish didn't have to deal with the Indians. I'm sorry, I'll be right back.
No, please. Sorry. Like, I know you're at work, so like, I'm gonna like say something else right now, and while we're waiting for Sila, and it's another thing that I found really fascinating is how like we can look at this film, and like find some similarities between one of Sartre's plays, No Exit. So there is like, I don't know if anyone read that, like, or know about the characters. So there are three characters on that book, and also there's the question of this pristine morality, and you know, and this uh uh how the like society, how like, you know, that famous, the other, the misery is the other, part of Sartre's philosophy. Like we can see it also here, like how we see, you know, with with Alice, with Thomas More, how he sees himself facing like his beliefs, his faith, and how he is in the eye of society, his image, you know, how we are, uh, you know, our responsibility toward the society that we live in, just like what Les said right now. Like, are we authentic? Are we truth to ourselves? Or like how we are as people in the like in society, in the bigger picture. So what happens in No Exit is that there are three people there, and each of them carry like a baggage. It's not like they are, you know, each of them is are legally condemned. So we don't care about this, you know. We care if we want to say like, okay, a system condemned them, but what is happening there is that they are kind of condemned to stay together in one room. So the fear that they have toward each other, how, and there is no mirror in that room. They have to see each other, they have to see their flaws from the eyes, from the gaze of the other. So is that like this, it brings this kind of social, like conversation of consciousness and like moral unconsciousness, like the anxiety of like, we feel the fear of being judged in the eye of the other. And also, like, do you think that Thomas More, you know, when we look at the characters like Thomas More, for him, he doesn't want the power, he doesn't want the money, he, it all happens to him because of who he is and what his social position gives him. So do you think like he, but because we see on that film, we see in Man for All Season, that his butler, how he changes, his flip side, his switch sides, his character changes when he sees that, oh, he's not like getting paid anymore, he's not working for him anymore. So when his social status changes, his character changes, his devotion changes, his conscience changes. So I think that gives a character like Thomas More something more than just a religious figure, a political figure. The fact that he is so true to himself, he has principles that he believes in for himself more than, he doesn't care about, yeah, he wants to make an example for the king, for the society, but his wife is more worried about the image than himself. He doesn't care. I think that, like, kind of existential question that we can look, that gives a very deep layer to the character. So what do you think about that? And also comparing to Beckett, you know, because the way that Henry II behaves on that film, like how he treats the subjects, how he looked at. Also, we see here with how Henry VIII treats the subjects, like as we said at the beginning of the room, like when they have to like run after the boat, and he laughs at them and he mocks them. That like kind of, very, also kind of like Raskolnikov and Dostoevsky kind of crime and punishment thing, that we can look at it like that. If anything, if how you see it like that, from like the social morality and personal morality.
I like that. I mean, there's several things that I have in my mind. One is that I think we live in a society. Oh, that what I was trying to say when I became a customer here, when I got a customer to came to me. In earlier periods, the Scottish had to do with the English with the Irish, and things like that. But it was easier to say, well, we do it this way here, and those are our rules. Today, we have a global authority telling us that if we do it this way in the United States, it's not enough, because this United Nations, or whoever that may be, says that in the world a human cannot be treated this way. So my point is that today we have a lot more conflicting interests and parties trying to reach a certain point than we had before. Before, if I had if I felt that you insulted me or you insulted my wife, I could ask you legitimately to go outside with me and we'll have a duel. Today, you can't do that. I mean, I mean, you could, but somebody's going to pay for it for many years. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is we used to do things more directly. Everything was more direct. Everything was one to one. Yes, you got decapitated a little bit quicker, but things were more one to one real. I also like very, very, very much that point of what am I being guided by? What I believe in, like Thomas More, or based on how I'm going to be judged by society, which obviously for me very clearly is the only thing that counts is what I believe. I'm not going to hurt someone else because I believe I have to hurt someone else. That's a completely different level. But generally speaking, I strongly like and would love to live in a society where we do not depend on religion, but we have a fundamental understanding of what our existence is, to the point that we might use a religion to support us, but we're not going to kill for another religion, as some of us do today. Yeah, that's some of the points that I was thinking about.
Exactly. And Les, he said something at the beginning of the room, the Berman's effect, the philosophy of Berman. That is exactly what you were talking about, Sila, right now. And I think Les can like contribute more to that. That is what I said like last week that is so interesting is that uh, if we look at the power aspect of society, like from Foucault's point of view, we said like that, you know, the society that governs itself. You know, this is this idea of like how do you say like that panopticon, that prison. There is this prison that uh, the guard sits in the middle, and all the prisoners see each other. So if after a while, that it's kind of like Pavlovian reaction. If that like guard leaves, like the prisoners, they don't see him anymore, but they still behave well and they don't escape because they watch each other. It's like kind of they they have this judgmental eye, they have this guarding eye to each other. And like I like how you know that he said like to Foucault, he says this is the utopia. This is utopia, like when you don't have to like be judged or been watched by like someone else. Is when like in like you don't need punishment. It's the society that like when we care for each other and for society as much, you know, this is the perfect, he says utopia is this. And I brought it up because Thomas More, he is the guy who created the word utopia. He is the one who wrote the book Utopia for the first time and uses this word, you know. So he, the idea that he had in mind, I'm sorry but please excuse my cat, I talk too much and they went so like bonkers. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I think how like someone in 20th century has the same idea and beliefs like to that speaks to the contemporary political power and of the time, also today that we live right now, we want to have that utopia belief. And also someone like Thomas More who created the word and talks about it in his book, and he like wrote that story. Okay, there are many flaws to his story, but the thing that he said in the book that really like sits well with me and I found it so beautiful is he said that, you know, for a very religious guy like him, he says that any kind of religion is acceptable I mean to his eye. That's what you think, like what Sila you said, that he is a bigger character, like from the religious point of view he is bigger than Jesus. You see it in his book Utopia, because he says as long as the people in that society don't do any harm to each other, they don't need any religion. They can have any belief that they want, as long as their belief doesn't like, if they want to be atheist, they're allowed to be atheist, as long as they don't like their lack of belief won't create lack of judgment and morality in them. And I found that really beautiful. And I think like I wish like Eric was here, because I know that he wanted to like talk about Wittgenstein and so many other, but yeah, I think like I talk too much, and I want to thank you all for like helping me to like have this room without Eric. And if anything you want to add, please do it now. And yeah, so just see that the movie won 5 Academy Awards. It was the budget of $60 million and made 220 in box office. It was a very successful movie. You mentioned Vanessa Redgrave, Sila, at the beginning, like in the middle of the room. Vanessa Redgrave, she wasn't supposed to be credited in the film, but she found, and the movie was so prestigious that everyone wanted a part in it. So she said, yeah, for real. She just said, I just want the cameo. And that at the Oscars, that's the first time that a brother and sister are both nominated for the movie. It's so fascinating. The movies that are nominated with uh, uh, the Man for All Seasons in '66, they're amazing movies. I think we need to like talk about them. That's what Eric wanted to talk about. So I'm not gonna like go to like his territory, but that was a very good year for movie. This movie stood up, and I think it stood up to the like the time. It still speaks because it's, you know, the movie is as big as Orson Welles' ego and size in the film. And it's majestic. It's aesthetically beautiful. The colors, the music, the performances, the poetic, um, and that bitter aspect of the script, uh, the historic relevance, and I think it very well deserved the Oscars and all the mm, like achievements he gained. So if and then all this like side uh, conversations that we can talk about morality, we can talk about existentialism, we can talk about women, we can talk about like religion and politics, and the power play, like all these conversations that's still relevant, brings up to today. Yeah, so if you want to like have any final words, please. And sorry that I spoke.
No, I just since I said something with a strong tenor a while ago about more going further than Christ, I think it's only fair that I clarify what I mean with that. As I explained at the beginning, I was extremely impressed with the portrayal of his benevolent nature towards his purpose, to the point that when he was just 2 seconds before he's going to be decapitated, his whole demeanor, his facial expressions, everything was in peace and accepting. There was not a moment that I saw in those last 3 minutes of the film where he shows any type of, oh, you know, do we have to go through this, or being afraid or anything like that. Now, and that is the basis for my expression about being going beyond Christ. When Christ in the cross, I believe he's already on the cross, and says, if it is possible that this cup passes me by. I don't have the correct citation, what he said, the words he chose, but basically he was asking God, can you, can, if possible, can you give me a break? Do we have to go through this? And with the exception of the situation in court at the end, he is not, he's not, he actually says a couple of times, okay, if that's the way it goes, then take my life. I don't want this. I'm not doing this. And he shows no sign of sadness, frustration. This is the end. In fact, as you all probably remember, he says to the henchman, "You're sending me to God. What am I supposed to be sad about? Come on, let's do it." And Christ didn't do that. Christ said, "Please, if possible, give me a break."
Thank you. That was like, it kind of gave me goosebumps when you said, like, he says, take my life. Well, yeah. So, Les, if you want to like have any final words.
Sure. One is it'd be interesting to look at the series Wolf Hall that covers many of the same events, but from the standpoint of Cromwell. Um, very, it's an excellent series. Uh, and in terms of not fearing death, it's hard to beat Mark Twain. You know, an avowed atheist. He said, I was dead for billions of years before I was born, and it didn't hurt a bit. So, and he just saw being dead for a billion years, probably going to feel about the same way.
Thank you. That was amazing. Yeah, you're right. Actually, that like so. Next week, I post the link on in the chat. The movie that we're going to watch next week is free on YouTube. I just put it there. So it's gonna be fun. It has Michael McDowell in it. So please join us. We're not like mostly like this. We're more fun. So thank you so much, Sila Les, for like and I mean Mila, Pejman, Kali, like everyone who was here and helped me like to handle this room without Eric. And yeah, so have a nice rest of the weekend and hope to see you next week. Have a good one. Ciao.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we record this on the Clubhouse app. And by following the link in the episode description, you can add your voice to our crowd. Also, since you're listening on a podcast, do all the podcasty things for us. Liking, subscribing, telling your friends, telling your enemies too. They might like good movies. And thank you for being a listener to UK Cinema History.